this open forum, we are officially releasing the updated version of the guidelines for industry on child online protection. And the guidelines were originally launched, the original set of the guidelines were launched in 2009 as a set of 4 guidelines for children, for parents, guardians, educators, one for industry, which is the one we are revising, we have updated now, and one for policymakers. And the industry guidelines provide advice on how the ICT industry can work to help ensure children's safety while using the internet and any associated technologies or devices that can connect to it. And it also provides guidance to companies on identifying ways in which they can advance children's rights, facilitate responsible digital citizenship, learning, and civic participation. Today's discussion panel will be structured into 2 parts. We'll first start with a discussion by giving you more details on the industry guidelines, hearing from some of our key contributors which are spread around the roundtable. We'll then have a discussion on the implementation plans, the follow-up activities to roll out the new guidelines to ensure that these are widely adopted. Before I introduce the panelists, let me also convey the greetings of our special envoy to the ITU for Child Online Protection, Her Excellency Deborah Taylor-Tate, who couldn't be here but conveys her greetings. Now I'll introduce the panelists. The first one is Aya Hetavu, the UNICEF Corporate Social Responsibility Manager. Aya is right there. John Carr, the Senior Advisor for ECPAT International. Belinda Exelby, Director, Institutional Relations, GSMA. Thank you, Belinda. Ellen Blackler, Vice President, Walt Disney Corporation. And Giacomo Mazzone, who's the Head of Institutional Relations and Member Relations at EBU, the European Broadcasting Union. And Amy Crocker, Hotline Development Coordinator at InHope. Amy. And before we start, I'll just explain how we started this exercise of revising the guidelines for industry. During the meeting of the ITU Council Working Group on Child Online of Experts, a platform that ITU provides for all stakeholders to come together, exchange best practices, tools, deliberate on public policy issues, and we usually meet twice a year. In the last meeting in February, members recommended that the previous set of guidelines be updated since it was outdated. The last time it was drafted was in 2009. So we started the coordination with ITU's subjects and the new actors to be included in the work. And we have drafted this document, the COP partners, together as a team. We have drafted this document through several rounds of consultations among the partners and with a core group of partners contributing to the content of the various sections, and we'll be hearing from some of them. And of course, we are really grateful to UNICEF, who's been the main partner and supporter. They took the lead in editing the document, helping and engage key organizations, and also promoting the work. And to be sure that we have a good quality document, we also launched an open consultation last year in Bali at the IGF, and which was followed by an online consultation. In January, we took all the feedback that we got, and revised the draft that we had based on that. And we believe now it's a much richer document, bringing different perspectives in. And several organizations contributed to the work. Quickly on the structure of the guidelines. We have 5 main areas with 6 checklists. The main areas are policy and management processes. By the way, you have this flyer here, if in case you haven't picked it up, it's right there, which gives you kind of the structure. Policy and management processes, child sexual abuse contents, safer and age-appropriate content, educating children, parents, and teachers, and positive use of ICTs. And there are 6 checklists for mobile operators, for ISPs, social media, internet access in public places, for content providers, online retailers, app developers, and hardware manufacturers. So at this stage, I'll pass on the floor to Aya, who will introduce the guidelines.
Good morning, everybody. So I don't know exactly who is in the audience, and I'd actually be interested to know, are you civil society, or are you what kind of background you have, because I think that should influence what we say here, because it's basically a very open discussion. We're just here to share our work and explain why we've done it and why we think it's a good idea. Well, in any case, so I'll just go through some of the what and whys and hows from the UNICEF perspective, and I'd be very, very keen to answer any questions that you may have, because I think many people may be questioning why we need another set of guidelines, because there's plenty of guidelines and frameworks for child online protection out there. So what is actually the motivation to start reviewing some old guidelines which were frankly not very much used, and so what's the business case basically? Well, the business case for UNICEF was really the fact that we have very many different units working with the ICT industry and the digital world, and it's been quite a challenge, as you may imagine, UN organization present in 190 countries, to connect the dots and have a similar kind of an approach to all these things, whether it's ICT for development, ICT for communication, child online protection, digital citizenship. So we've been part of the ITU COP initiative since it was founded, not very actively, I should probably add, because we actually didn't have one kind of a focal point for this matter. And in the recent years, I think it's been much more, it's become much more apparent that we need to consolidate forces across the organization and work together on this. And so what we decided after some reviews, and actually I have my colleague here from the research side of the organization here, and they convened a kind of a UNICEF-wide group together to discuss this, and it was kind of our group, so I come from the CSR unit, we were made responsible for anything to do with when it comes to child online protection, digital citizenship, and business specifically. So we had the mandate within the organization, and then we were looking around to see, what kind of policy frameworks or what kind of guidance could we use as the basis across the organization to make sure that we all speak with the same voice. And there wasn't anything. So there wasn't anything which would have been rights-based, which was very important for us. There wasn't anything which would be broadly internationally adopted by businesses, which would be up to the standards that would be required, whether it was voluntary or linked to international standards. But I think the core was really that there's a lot of movement around the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Also on the Convention of the Rights of the Child, there is a general comment which relates to business, and there wasn't any kind of a foundation or any kind of a framework founded on these things. Nor was there anything specific to different subsectors of the ICT industry. So as we were speaking with the COP partners within the ITU initiative, I think there were many other organizations who felt that there should, we should go back and see, would it be possible to come up with something which would be rights-based, which would link to normative frameworks that exist in context of children and children's rights and business, and which would be broad enough to be adopted internationally, but something that could be used at national level and specific to industry. So that was really the foundation. And I think we've come a long way. We started, like Preetam was explaining, within the core group of the members of the ITU COP initiative. But when it was broadened to the public consultation, we actually got quite a few businesses and industry coalitions who also wanted to contribute to this discussion, because I think there was a need for something like this to be put together. And I think the process that we went through, it was pure pain. I can just speak from the UNICEF perspective. We received a lot of feedback. Everybody was disagreeing on most things because we have a lot of civil society organizations with very specific missions and mandates looking at addressing a very, very small part of the big world. To consolidate something that everybody felt happy with was a major undertaking. So we're not saying that this framework is perfect, and it's not even almost perfect, but I think in terms of the overall first part of the guidelines, which covers the general guidelines, I think that's something which is very solid, and it incorporates what is already out there as good practice. So we looked at the existing frameworks. So for instance, there are initiatives within the European Union. There are other industry initiatives which have been broadly adopted. And we looked at what's good in these. What are the good practice standards out there already? And we wanted to make sure that this standard goes beyond that as well, but it kind of sets the benchmark in that area. And then we looked at and tried to work with the industry bodies and associations to come up with sector-specific guidelines or checklists, which would be detailed enough, but not something that would establish something which is completely unrealistic. And I think there's a lot of work to be done on the industry-specific list still. I mean, we have one good example of where I think we've achieved a lot, and that's our friends here at the GSMA with the mobile operators. We also have lots of individual companies who've been part of the initiative and provided feedback. So I think that is work very well done. I think for the other checklists, we still, I mean, they will be living documents, so we look to review and revise these documents moving forward. So that's why we have the 2014 edition of the guidelines. So I think that really kind of explains the whys and hows and where we are today. And I hope really sincerely that these guidelines are going to be used. And at least from the UNICEF perspective, we've started an internal training program around this. We want to make sure that at national level, our both child protection and other, whether it's ICT innovation people or it is CSR people, they are aware of this work, and we've already established partnerships with some private sector participants to make sure that these are actually practical enough that they will also be used at the country level. So I think I'll stop there. And we also, we didn't foresee to go through the guidelines in a very sort of detailed structure here, but if you're interested, we also have PowerPoints where we can maybe explain them. So the guidelines are so fresh that they were actually, the final PDF was put together yesterday. So you can imagine two UN agencies trying to get the Secretary General's and ED's signatures because they are endorsed by both of our leaders. It was quite a lot of paperwork, but they are there. They are on the ITU COP website and hopefully soon also on our website. And as we speak, there's also press releases going out, and we also have initiatives at country level through the UNICEF offices in some countries, and looking forward to having more activities, but we'll speak about that a bit later. Thank you very much. If you have any questions at this point, I mean, happy to answer, but maybe we'll put the questions together a bit later.
Thank you, Iya. And thank you again, UNICEF, for taking the lead in putting together the guidelines. Now call upon John, who's one of the lead contributors.
I too will be brief. You'll be glad to hear. I represented ECPAT International in this process, ECPAT being a global NGO headquartered in Bangkok with members in, by the way, my boss is here from ECPAT International, Marie-Laure, so I've got to check everything with her to make sure I get it right, because otherwise I'll be in such trouble. 82 members in 75 countries, something like that anyway, on all 5 continents. And the issues in these guidelines are very much center space for us. Our name is on the document. We're very proud and pleased that it is. And I can confirm Aya's point about pain, the drafting, and in a way this is a testament to the value of the thing. I mean, I've never been in such a meticulously kind of scrutinized and a document that's been so closely scrutinized and argued over. Should the comma be there? Should the full stop be there? It's okay for you to say that in English, but if that's translated into Albanian, it means your mother is a cow, or, you know, or so. All of these sorts of very, very complicated factors were very, very carefully weighed in the balance. And as I said, I have never taken part in a process that was quite so careful and quite so long. I mean, I think it was best part of 2 years in the end when we began this revision. But that, I think, gives the document strength and value, because and it wasn't just people like me. I mean, the UNICEF and GSMA and me and a few others were the most intensely involved, but Google, Microsoft, Facebook, I mean, the BBC, through Giacomo, various broadcasting, there was lots and lots and lots of input from many different substantial, Disney, there was lots and lots of substantial input from major players, which again adds to the value and strength of the document. It's not prescriptive. It doesn't say there is only one correct way to approach this issue or that issue, but it does reflect, as Aya was suggesting, a lot of experience that we've now had around the world in different bits of the internet space, and sets out, I think, what I hope will be a very, very useful document for, particularly in perhaps developing world countries, particularly where new startups are coming into business. I mean, the big companies know this stuff already, or should do, but a lot of new businesses genuinely, they don't have research departments, they don't have much money to employ consultants, sadly. So this is exactly the kind of document that I hope they will use, and that governments will be able to look to as well, as an indication of what they can reasonably expect businesses that they're dealing with in their own jurisdictions to be able to do. For me, the really interesting and important question will be to see how widely we can get this document propagated. How can we make sure that everybody in the world who needs to know about it does in fact know about it, and how useful it can be. So I don't really want to say any more, because Aya said most of the really important stuff. I think it's a great document. I think it's going to be a very useful document. I'm glad I did it. I never want to have to do it again. But it's been a great process and a model. I mean, when I look at some of the other processes that are going on within this building and within the IGF, and I compare it with what happened with this, well, I mean, there is no comparison. This was serious. This was professional. This was well done. Some of the other processes that I could mention were not. And the difference in quality in output will be, or already is, quite obvious. There you are. No, I don't want to be controversial, as you know, so I'll...
Thank you, John. And thank you for all your efforts. And it's interesting you mentioned that you've never been part of an exercise where we discuss every comma. That means that you are lucky enough to have avoided any UN document drafting process. Now I'll ask Belinda from GSMA to say a few words.
Thanks, Pritam. Good morning, everybody. As you may be aware, the GSMA represents the interests of the mobile operators around the world. So what we brought to this process was the mobile industry perspective. And I thought it might be useful just to explain where we get that input from, so that there's some sort of justification for the points that we put into the guidelines. So we actually run two programs around child online protection with the mobile operators. One is called mYouth, and the other is our Mobile Alliance Against Child Sexual Abuse Content. So the Mobile Youth Programme is set up to protect children online and promote safer use of mobile phones. And broadly, it encourages a self-regulatory approach amongst operators, encouraging them to set up, for example, parental controls, or to establish barriers to children accessing age-inappropriate content. We have a large number of members, over 100 involved in that programme. Another part of that program is also an in-depth research project that we do, and I've brought along some documents on that table there and some memory sticks which have some of the findings of the research. We've been talking to children and their parents since 2009 and have so far interviewed over 20,000 sets of parents and children to understand the societal impact of mobile phone use by children and also parental concerns about what their children are accessing. So that's really about making sure that children are safe online. The other initiative that I mentioned, the Mobile Alliance Against Child Sexual Abuse Content, is an organization in which, or an initiative in which operators sign up and commit to implementing a number of measures, technical measures that will prevent children, prevent people trying to either sort of profit from or host or use their networks to promote child sexual abuse material. So those operators that do join, and we have now operators in 67 countries who have signed up to this, they agree that they will support and promote hotlines, and we've worked a lot with InHope on that, in that angle, so that customers can report child sexual abuse content. They also commit to implement notice and takedown processes, so if there is content found on their sites, they can legally remove it. And they provide technical mechanisms to prevent access to websites that have been identified as, by an appropriate agency as hosting child sexual abuse content. So that initiative has really informed a lot of what we supplied into the guidelines, and the second part of the guidelines is around checklists for different industries, and you'll see that the checklist for mobile operators draws very heavily on that experience. So I'll probably stop there. I just wanted to explain where we got our input from, and perhaps it's worth pointing out that some of our operators have been involved in this area for many years, particularly I'd say Telefonica and Vodafone, who were involved in some of the developed markets very early on, and it's really great that their experience of dealing with these things then is now coming into play to help operators in countries where it's only now becoming a tipping point of an issue. So I think it's very valuable to have that real world practical experience. Thanks.
Thanks, Belinda, and thanks to GSMA for being a key contributor. I know you were very active in the process. Now I'll pass the floor to Ellen from the Walt Disney Company.
Thank you. Excuse me. My name is Ellen Blackler. I'm with the Walt Disney Company. I will talk a little bit about the content-related sections. What we did there was really collect information, I think, from companies who have been working in the space for quite a while, and tried to put in one place a little bit of the lessons learned and what people who work in that area have discovered over time are the risks that manifest themselves online, and what you can do to be ready for them when they do. And I think that was really one of the things that come through well and are emphasized in the guidelines, is this idea about having processes in place to deal with these things, rather than, and knowing what your processes are and knowing who is responsible, and having a system in place so that when something that you hope doesn't happens, you're ready to deal with it. And I think that was, that I hope will be useful to other businesses, particularly a lot of times businesses get into a particular product or a line of business and they were not thinking much about children when they started out that way. They weren't perhaps expecting children to use it. They weren't even aware of, the kinds of content trouble that's out there. And so I hope that businesses will use this and at least start to think about the things that they need to have, even if they don't think of themselves as a child service, or have even taken steps to prevent children from using their service. We know that that one can't rely on that there's always other possibilities out there, and you have to be ready for them. I think the other thing that comes through, particularly in the content-related sections, is the need for industry cooperation to address some of these problems across sectors. That because the value chain that provides these services to customers includes so many people, from the mobile operator to the content provider, that I think we've all learned over, as the internet has evolved, that we all have to be pulling in the same direction on this issue and not pointing fingers at each other when something happens. And I think that comes through as well in the guidelines, that there's some good examples of how to work together and how to make sure you have the lines of communication that you need between different sectors, because what we find is the best place to address some of these risks isn't always, lie on one single player, that there's, from a parent's perspective and a child's perspective, where they get their information and at the time at which they're paying attention isn't always the easiest nexus point for one particular part of the industry to deal with. So that's why it's helpful, I think, when the app, for instance, when an app developer, when the platform, and when the mobile provider are all kind of on the same page about giving information to parents and providing opportunities, we have a chance to catch people when they're paying attention and not simply kind of rely on one industry sector to do it. The other thing that I think people should be thinking about, and that comes through in the guidelines as well, is in a lot of countries, there's actual specific legal requirements that have to be addressed, particularly related to privacy and advertising. And so we tried to highlight those in there and make sure that, again, people as they're developing their products are aware of those things, even if they're not intending their product to be used for children. That we all know how the internet works, and kids are going to find what's out there. So I think that comes through as well, that people need to be aware of these particular legal requirements and designing their product to comply with them at the outset. And I guess I too will stop there. We'll hear from the group.
Thanks, Helen. Now, Giacomo, he brought in the broadcaster's perspective. EBU was leading that effort. So, Giacomo, a few words.
Thank you. EBU, the European Broadcasting Union, represents, as you know, 64 members, broadcasting organization of Europe, Middle East, and North Africa, and is attending the IGF and the WSIS process on behalf of the World Broadcasting Union, the other 7 broadcasting unions that represent all the continents of the world. We have a long tradition of cooperating with the ITU in various sectors, and one of the sectors is the child protection. We started this in the past, but we have intensified in the last period, and we have participated to all the efforts in this direction. For instance, the Child Online action that has been created some years ago. We are founding members, and also the special council working group that deals with the same topic. When we were invited the first time 5 years ago to work to the first edition of the guidelines, we participated with enthusiasm, because for the broadcaster sector, as Ellen just said, is crucial to have a trustful relation with the audience. And this is particularly true for the national and the public service broadcaster, because you deserve the trust of the families, and you need to build and to continue to have this relation with your audience. The fact that most of our members are non-profit organization and are acting on the basis of specific remits and missions make even more important for us to fulfill this scope. In the guidelines of 2008 became obsolete. Just to give you an idea, in these guidelines, we were still talking of MySpace as an example of social network. Probably you don't even remember what MySpace was. So last year, when when you were at school yet, yeah. So you see that we are facing a sector in very fast evolution, and we need to cope with that. The broadcasting world, as you know, is not equal, is not all on the same page. According to countries, we have countries where digitalization process has gone very far away. Most of Europe is now digital signal everywhere, but the rest of the world is not the case. But even within our area, Europe and North Africa, Middle East, there are countries where the internet penetration is still not so easy and not so spread around. So we need to face a different degree of involvement of our members of the broadcasting world. Because in some countries they have already gone online, they have already a lot of on-demand traffic, and in others they have not. So we have the same problem in ITU. We need to find a tool that could be modular, and each one could adapt to the level of the situation where it belongs. So in this sense, the effort that we have done, thanks to the UNICEF joining the effort, is very important, because I think that last time we had a tool that was important because it was establishing principle. But now we have really something that is like a checklist that each one could apply. So some of them will stop at point 3, others will arrive at point 6, and the others can fulfill everything. And we can say to all of them, please do this as a tool for checking if you are you are tuned with the best practice existing in the world, knowing that not all of them will be on the same page at the same time. The work that we have done was not from scratch, but was based on a lot of efforts that are already done by some of our members, mainly BBC, that is probably the most advanced in this sector, because they have to deal with people asking them every day, like John Carr, that ask if they are complying with the best practices. So probably because of that, they are the most advanced. But also others. The problem we had is that most of the documents are internal documents of broadcasters, not all of them public on their website. And also most of them are the national languages. So it was quite painful to go through all the different documents. But I have to say that they were, most of them, on the same line. And we used this in order to compile what, according to the standard that we share with you, seems the best practices in the sector. To give an idea, we used the Swedish document of the Swedish television, Swedish radio, the Italian document from RAI, but also the TRT gave us suggestions. They have a specialized channel here, TRT Kochuk, if the pronunciation is correct, and others all around our region. So we are very glad to participate in this effort, and I think that we have to consider that this, that you can see as a printed version, is simply the tip of the iceberg. In our idea, according to our will, then in the online version we could update, not waiting other 5 years to make a structural revision. And also you can integrate with a lot of other literature that could exist. For instance, yesterday was mentioned that the hotline addresses, we cannot publish all of them in this initial printed document, but of course in the online this could be enriched and could be more detailed. Thank you.
Thanks, Giacomo. And you also brought up a very important point. This is a living document. Obviously, it will be updated with information. And we're also providing an online platform for case studies that I'll explain after I first call upon Amy to say a few words. Amy from the Foundation.
Thank you very much. My name is Amy. For those of you who don't know InHope in the room, I'm here to represent InHope, which is the International Association of Internet Hotlines, and our 51 members around the world provide reporting mechanisms for the public and also industry to report child sexual abuse material found on their platforms and to remove them from public access. Our UK partner, the Internet Watch Foundation, has been very involved in this process, I know, and they can't be here this morning, but I do speak, I hope, for them and also, as I said, for our members around the world. Obviously, these guidelines are quite, are very broad. InHope's role and InHope's perspective is particularly focusing on the development of standard processes for dealing with child sexual abuse material found online. The contribution from InHope, from the Internet Watch Foundation, as well, draws on 15 years of experience working very closely with industry, as well as other sectors, to address the challenges, whether it's in detecting material found online or establishing effective processes for removing the material and reporting it to law enforcement. So really our excitement and our commitment to this document is helping industry, particularly in countries where it can prove very challenging to get the buy-in from industry and from government to really move processes forward to protect children online. The work that I do with the InHope Foundation is particularly focusing in emerging markets where these processes are not so established, and these guidelines are an excellent, provide an excellent framework for helping industry and helping organizations that would like to establish effective hotlines in the country to put together processes. So I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to be here, and I hope certainly when we talk a little bit more about as many panelists have mentioned, implementation, how we move forward, because this is really the key point, you know, how do we use these guidelines to make changes for children? And I really know that InHope's role will be, I think, very, very key in this, and we really look forward to working with everyone to implement the guidelines in countries around the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And before we open up the floor for first round of questions, I'd like to point you to an online platform that we have which hosts a variety of case studies, providing detailed information on policies, best practices, actions, processes that the broader ICT industry has implemented in this area. And it's an extended component of the guidelines for industry, as these were updated by ITU-UNICEF, the COP partners. And the case studies follow the structure of the document for this particular aspect, focusing on 5 key areas, integrating child rights considerations into appropriate corporate policies and management processes is one, developing standards to help child sexual abuse material handling of it is one, creating a safer and age-appropriate online environment, educating children, parents, teachers about child safety and the responsible use of ICTs. And the last one is promoting digital technology as a mode for increasing civic engagement. And we call upon the industry representatives in the room to also submit case studies to the platform so that it can be richer with your experience. So, with that, I'll just open the floor for questions at this point to see if you have any questions about the guidelines as such before we go to the next round. Is there a mic that someone can pass on, or a mic for questions? Yeah. So again, does anyone have any questions now that we have a mic ready?
May I? Yes. Hello, my name is Diana Prochenko. I represent academia institutions here from Ukraine. And for us, this sphere of protecting especially children in internet, it's a very important sphere, but we don't have, so to say, well-developed national legislation at this point, and also for some regulations for business sphere. We have certain mechanism of, so to say, industrial association of such online claim, but I know that it's not enough. That is why I hope that I can also transfer the information that I get here to them. Maybe they can use it also, but I need to understand a little bit more about what are the main points or the main content of the guideline. Can you please tell in more details? Thank you.
I don't know if it's the best use of our time to go into detail, but I'd just like to add to something that we actually didn't address. So as you may remember from the introduction, so from the ITU COP initiative, there's been 4 sets of guidelines that were developed. And we're also in the process, or in the beginning of a process, to review another document which is aimed at governments, and it's about policy development. And John Carr has done the first round of that, and currently it's been parked at UNICEF. But I'm happy to let you know that it is moving forward. So I think this is I would see these guidelines as something that you can advocate with the government, but it's not adequate enough to leverage for policy development. I mean, I think maybe in the area of online child abuse content, there's elements which are easier to take in separation, but in terms of, if you look at the Convention of the Rights of the Child and cybercrime and these connecting points, etc., it becomes quite complex in terms of legislation. And maybe John would like to add to this.
Well, 2 things. Is there a flyer in there? Okay, so you've got the 5 headings within the document covering the broad issues that the thing addresses. But it's not a prescriptive document. It doesn't say this is the only correct way to do this or do that. But it reflects experience, as we've heard, that's been gathered by companies and by NGOs around the world. So I think when you get it, and I think it will be produced in Russian at any rate. Yeah. It will be translated into... Okay. Okay. Actually, yeah, there's stuff going on over there at the moment, isn't there? Yeah. But the good news, I guess, is that ECPAT has a branch in the Ukraine. Olga Shved, I don't know if you've come across her, but we have a local office, as it were, and I'll be happy to, or Marie-Laure, who's from the head office of ECPAT in Bangkok, we give you her contact details. She lives in Kiev, and she can follow through with any other points that you might have. Yeah, yeah.
Always refer to Ukraine. I think that first, you have not to expect, in my opinion, everything from legislation. Legislation have to give just some framework, but then most of the activities is suggested by us, recommended by us, that could be made through the self-regulation of the operators in participation with the authorities. Because now you are in the process, and the EBU is participating with the Council of Europe to shaping the mandate for the new national broadcasters and also for the application of the new audiovisual legislation. I think this is the right moment to address this issue in a way that within the status of the new broadcasters, within the remits, these things will be precised. And then this could be even discussed with the rest of the community or the audiovisual industry in the country. That for us is the best solution. Never a legislation could solve all the problems that you have, and never legislation could cope with the change, continuous change of the environment. So you need both legislation and local agreement between the various interested parts.
Yep.
Thank you. Lelia Green, Australia. How do the guidelines reflect the emerging issues, such as the right to be forgotten and the right for children to ask for takedown of materials posted by their parents or friends, please?
There's certainly a lot in there about the children's rights. I mean, AM made the point at the beginning that this is the whole tenor of the document approaches it from a child rights perspective, and children have legal rights to access the internet and to do things, and that's often forgotten. People think, oh, we're ever trying to do is stop them from doing things or protecting them from that. That's absolutely not the case, and it's reflected throughout the document. I can't remember specifically if there's a reference to the right to be forgotten. I think that might have come along very late in the process. But the framework itself, I hope, is suggestive of an approach that would indicate that people should be paying attention to that, and above all, listening to what children and young people themselves have to say about the issues. I mean, and it is a living document, just to go back to the point that Pritam made. The PDF can be adjusted in time to reflect anything that comes through. Lynn?
Yeah, on the UGC section in particular has a lot of information about the need to have takedown policies, clear content policies, including takedown procedures and including requests for takedown from users. So, again, what I hope that does is it stimulates companies to think about what their policies are going to be clear about their policies, and disclose their policies so that users will know before they go in, and then when something like this comes up, they'll know. But it doesn't, John is right, it doesn't specifically say, here's how you implement the right to forgotten, here's how you implement that.
And maybe just to add to this general rights question, I mean, the aim of the document is not to solve the sort of global issues of freedom of expression or privacy or things which are broader than just child rights as well. I mean, we do recognize that there are issues beyond, when it comes to human rights rather than just child rights.
But the point about the conditions of service and such like is that children are not necessarily old enough to know better, and they're often posting stuff that isn't about themselves but about their peers. And many children are subjected to images in utero being posted by their parents, pointing out that they've got, for example, birth defects or genetic, oh no, I found this out at the ultrasound today on Facebook or whatever. And so children have a digital record long before they have any rights or capacity to question it, and then they want to take it down.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because it is a very specific child rights piece. So as it lives, I do think that needs to get brought in. So Mark Sermon from Mozilla, and I guess maybe this is an offline thing, but as I was just glancing through the guidelines for the first time, I was wondering, as you guys were tackling all this, how you handled, and I guess how you feel you landed on what I think is commonly in these debates, the tension between the empowerment piece, which I think is very well written in there around participation, digital literacy, and the blocking controls piece, which is as soon as you empower kids to actually understand how the internet works, the blocking control piece doesn't work anymore, because it's not very difficult to figure out how to get around it. So how did you deal with the kind of tension of control over information and access versus kind of making sure kids are as empowered with the technology as possible? Those seem in tension in what's in there.
Certainly is a tension, yeah.
I'm interested in that. How did you guys wrestle with that?
Well, there is no single or correct answer to it. I mean, for example, few people argue about the importance of, at least from a normative standpoint, of trying to ensure that known illegal content, child abuse images, the stuff that InHope deals with, is not accessible. So in that respect, blocking is not controversial, or the concept is not controversial, although there's arguments about methods and which are more effective or less good. I mean, by the way, we did, there was some research done in the UK by Ofcom, which is our statutory regulator, which indicated that whilst it was true that many kids knew how to circumvent blocks and things like that, the great majority of them in fact didn't. Some did, but the great majority didn't. Because the idea that every child is a super cool dude who knows how to do everything and get everywhere on the internet, it's a myth. And so technical solutions can play a part, a limited part. But the fundamental message of this document is child's rights. So we don't want any technical tools to be used to deprive children of the legal rights they have under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I won't try and guess what the numbers were, because Aya will correct me immediately when I get it wrong, but there's a clear statement about that children have a right to access information from diverse sources, to express their opinions, to associate with others and so on. Nothing in this document argues against that at all, but recognizes that in particular situations, particular circumstances, there are things that need to be done. And how you do them and who does them, these are questions that will vary from one jurisdiction to the next.
So just because I only scanned the document for the first time a minute ago, is the stuff around blocking mostly related to illegal content, which is an obvious thing, or it seemed to, in reading it, be a bit broader in scope than that?
Well, we talk about an age-appropriate environment. I mean, for example, in the United Kingdom, it is technically illegal for any company anywhere in the world to publish pornography within the legal borders of the United Kingdom without first ensuring that there is an age verification mechanism in place. The fact that Pornhub disregard that completely and always is an issue. It's a problem. So it's in that kind of that's the basic idea. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Just to answer to what the Australian colleague said, asked before, if you look at the list of the organizations that have contributed, probably you will see that there are some missing important actors. Guess why they are absent from that list, and guess why a certain kind of topics have not been treated by us. But this is reality. We're producing guidelines for industry based on voluntary commitment. We are committed to what we say, we are committed to what we write. Others decide not to commit and not to write. That's a reality that we need to face. And concerning the problem that the Mozilla representative expressed, you have to consider that guidelines are always a bottom line consensus point. We cannot go a lot far beyond, because then it will not be any more guidelines. It will be something that you prescribe only to those that could attend it. And there is basically a big cultural problem. What is forbidden in one region of the world, what is not appropriate for children, could be appropriate for other parts of the world. This is the main problem we have as broadcasters, because once, for us, the solution was simple. You put controversial issue, controversial program late at night, because we're supposing that children were sleeping. But when you have an on-demand world, the children could, these are the contents that they will like eventually to go to spot first. So we need to find other solution, and the age verification is really an issue. In fact, at the ITU, we are working within the technical community to try to see if it's possible to have age verification mechanisms that are not intrusive, that are not restricting the freedom of expression and access to contents, that could be used eventually by us. But for the moment, we are not yet there.
Thanks, Giacomo. One last question, and then we can move on to the second part.
Yes, Sonia Livingstone from EU Kids Online. I have a question really about implementation. And it's a question that comes from the efforts of the Better Internet programme, trying to find ways of getting some accountability from companies about how they do manage their child protection practices. And what we learned there is very many companies don't know if those who are using their services are children, and that is sufficient often to say, therefore, we don't need child protection policies. We cannot know who is holding the mobile phone. We cannot know who is visiting the website. We don't know if they're a child. Therefore, as it were, we don't have children on our services. So some companies, of course, dedicate themselves to children, like Disney knows its market is children. But you said something early on about hoping that companies who weren't specifically targeting children but nonetheless had children on their services would implement these guidelines, and I just wonder what kind of encouragement or compliance there might be behind that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be discussing about the implementation, I think, now, but in any case, I think you have a very good point there, and we've had discussions with many companies who are in a situation, and I think this links to this whole value chain, and you know, especially the mobile operators. I think they have some of the biggest challenges with the smartphones, but I think we don't have the actual answer to your question, but one thing that we have been talking about with GSMA and with some others and all that, so you know, it needs to be a collaboration. There needs to be a policy level support for some of these changes to happen. There needs to be genuine interest in specifying products that are targeting children if they are currently in the adult category and it's just children using, or there needs to be mechanisms to actually just monitor the age of the user. But I mean, this is also very specific to, you know, the subsectors of the ICT industry, how it can be controlled.
And your point about the mobile operators is very true. It is a challenge for the operators. And a big part of our youth program is around education of parents. And that's partly why our research brings in the parental angle as well, to understand what the concerns are and how much they're aware of what their children are doing. We actually interview the parents and the children separately. And there's quite often a big sort of gap in knowledge between, you know, the two groups. And that does help the operators to go out with a message about responsibility. You know, as a parent, you also have responsibility. It's not just down to the operator, because, you know, we can't tell the person at the end of the phone. But it's something that we're very aware of, and we try and encourage all of the operators to make sure that that education element is built in, so that the parents will use the parental controls which are provided, and you know, help to address the problem.
Just make a quick follow-up, because one of the things we tried to do in this exercise was kind of follow through what happened when there was concerns from a child. So it came down to things like whether the call centre that the customers call into ask if the concern is about a child, and none of them said that they did. So even if parents are aware, if children are encountering a problem, if the services that are then set up to deal with that problem are not aware that this is a child, they just log it as whatever they normally log it as, it doesn't get that particular kind of attention. And that's the follow-through that I'm really interested in.
I'm not sure the United Nations is equipped for detailed follow-through and accountability stuff. No. Yeah, and there's a sister document, the what do they call it, the business rights thing.
Maybe I should add that parallel to this initiative, we have other initiatives with the industry from the broader business and children's rights perspective. And one thing that we're doing, which is actually specific to the mobile operator subsegment currently, is we're working with operators to do an impact assessment of both the sort of internal processes around the products and services, whether it's workplace, marketplace, and community, but also at country level in countries where they operate. So one of the GSMA members has initiated this, and we're working with a consultancy, and I hope this type of tools for the different subsectors of the ICT sector will support them in assessing their own processes and procedures and how this can be tackled.
So Sonia's question was a good segue to our second part, which is discussing the implementation, the rollout plans. How do we ensure that these guidelines reach the widest possible industry players, and the right players, of course, and that these are adopted by them? So at ITU, we plan to organize regional events, roundtable discussions. We're trying to spread the awareness also among our sector members. At ITU, we have 700 sector members, which are essentially private industry players, some of the largest tech companies in the world. We are targeting the regulators through our events that we have for them, like ITU Telecom, the Global Symposium for Regulators. Of course, in all this, we'll be partnering with all the key actors within the COP initiative. But now I'll ask the panelists to share their thoughts and ideas. And anyone in the audience also, please feel free to pitch in here. Linda?
Well, I'm pleased to say that last week UNICEF and GSMA made an announcement that we're going to be working together in Latin America as our first target region to sort of roll out the guidelines to all of the mobile operators there. It's a region which is growing very rapidly in terms of mobile broadband adoption, and the issue is becoming the issue of child protection is becoming more and more relevant all the time in that market. So we have our first workshop for operators in Paraguay in October, and that will be followed by others throughout this year. So we're very excited about that, and it's a good way to practically put forward the guidelines to the people who can use them.
Maybe I'll just expand from that. So within UNICEF, so the way we're approaching the kind of rollout or the practical implementation is that, first of all, we're sort of starting an internal training program. We've done some of that already. We've identified Latin America as the pilot country or pilot region where we're actually doing internal workshops, and with the help of GSMA and other partners, we hope to make sure that we also internally, our child protection colleagues, our CSR colleagues, our colleagues in the education program area, we all have the same kind of view. Plus, we also have existing private sector partners also in these regions. So making sure that we kind of, at national level, we set up the structure so that it reflects the national policies, what actually is happening there, and basically it's an approach where we tackle things from the baseline perspective of where the country stands. And this is really, we're learning, so we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I really look forward to this collaboration with GSMA because they obviously have a lot of experience already from these countries. So the idea is that it's going to be 5 countries in Latin America. And parallel to this, we've been researching countries to sort of focus countries in Asia and also the Gulf area and Africa to see that there's going to be a next range of countries where some of these pilots will then be brought over. I think we already run quite a lot of programs in schools around the world. We obviously do a lot of child protection on sort of offline child protection programs. We do lots of CSR work with the ICT sector. We do ICT for development and we do ICT for communication. We have a research group who are very well endorsed into ICT related research. So I think we have a lot of potential to push this agenda forward. I think there are challenges now that we've been doing these country level research pieces. We realize that the baseline in addressing and understanding about children and internet in most countries, outside of Europe, I guess, thanks to Sonia, it's very difficult to understand what's actually out there. So I think we'll be starting from very basics and trying to figure out also how do we set up the baseline, which should then inform what is required at national level from all these different areas where UNICEF operates, plus obviously the private sector part is on top of that. So lots of work ahead.
John?
Okay. Yeah, one of the reasons why I personally have always felt very enthusiastic about working with the ITU and UNICEF and that UN family of organizations is precisely because they have a reach into parts of the world, particularly the developing world, that frankly none of the European or North American organizations can have, and that's for political and historic reasons that we all understand. The governments and organizations in the developing world listen to the UN, listen to the UN institutions like UNICEF, like the ITU, in a way that they just won't to the rich white guys who keep invading other people's countries and stuff like that. And it's just a political fact of life. It's not always rational. I wish it were different, but it's the reality. So I'm very keen that I think this document will be able to have an impact and have an effect and reach into places that the wonderful work that's been done in the European, really brilliant work that's been done in the European Union and has been done in the United States, just won't. The UN has its regional structures, it has its people on the ground in all of these parts of the world, and now it has documents like this to work with. So I'm pretty sure within ECPAT International, which is a global body, we'll be doing what we can to push it out amongst our members, and it'll be easier for us to get them to accept it precisely because it's come from a UN institution and not from another one.
Yeah. Ellen and then Amy.
Sure, I think we have a really significant challenge, particularly in the app space and the content space, because there's so many more companies. It's not really comparable to the mobile operator space, and they just come from a different culture of not, of operating, with speed and operating in a really kind of minimal way to get your product out there. And I don't think we see the same emphasis in that industry on kind of understanding from the policymaker's perspective issues like, child safety. You just don't see the emphasis. Instead, we see an emphasis on anonymity, not wanting to, the regulatory incentives are such that you're actually incented not to know who your user are. Once you know that there are children, then you have all of these regulatory requirements, and that's the kind of ethic that comes out of that ecosystem. So I think that's where the big challenge is between that history and the just sheer numbers of people who don't probably even know the regulator exists. It's going to be, that's where I see the challenge. And some of that, I think, is reflected in the guidelines, which tried to be less about compliance in a scary way and more about here are the things you should be thinking about. But, that I think is where the bigger challenge will be. The mobile operators are well down this road of acting responsibly, and I think, we have differences of views about what they should be doing, but they're certainly in there trying to figure out the right thing to do. I just don't think we have that culture in the app space, for lack of a better word.
Amy?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to go a little bit back to the previous point about particularly looking at the Latin America region, but the focus regions of the In Hope Foundation. We're working particularly in Latin America right now and in Southeast Asia. And we work predominantly through NGOs, civil society organizations who are working on issues of internet safety and child online safety. And we're seeing a lot of momentum and a lot of interest in actually pushing industry and pushing governments to do more to protect children online, and that includes our focus area, which is child sexual abuse material and managing that. We've been working very closely with GSMA on this for several years, and we've also co-developed from the hotline perspective a guide for establishing a hotline, which also talks about working with industry, building relationships with industry. So it's really sort of interesting to look at how we can bring these different areas together. And absolutely, I mean, working with some of the very small organizations I work with, and I know also working closely with ECPAT, it can be hugely challenging for small organizations to get access to often international industry, global industry bodies who are operating in their countries. So having associations with, as John has mentioned, UNICEF with ITU is really important because it does give some traction, and this is really important in many countries. So we're certainly excited to see how we can support efforts in Latin America and moving forward in other regions.
Okay. I believe there's a comment there in the back.
My name is Yasmina Byrne. I work with UNICEF Office of Research, AA's colleague. And I think I just want to echo what was said previously, that this is just the beginning. Obviously, it's fantastic that the guidelines are out, and we are all looking forward to it. And it reminds me of another initiative that ECPAT actually started, Code of Conduct on prevention of sexual abuse and exploitation in travel and tourism. And mobilizing private sector is to adopt the guidelines is great, but it's not always sufficient, because there needs to be also follow-up, a process and impact assessment. And I'm glad to hear that this is happening with the GSMA, and from the research perspective, as Aya was pointing out, we don't even have the baselines. How do we know where the impact has really been made on children's lives? And are you planning to also, through the process of adoption of the guidelines by the private sector, kind of influence them in a way to also do some follow-up through self-assessment, impact evaluations periodically, to see what differences does it make, not only in the private sector and but also in the lives of children. Thanks.
Giacomo, anything on the plan to get the broadcasters to be aware of this.
Are you going to get every one of your members to do a documentary about how wonderful the document is?
He's already promised that.
He's already promised.
No, never. We, as a trade association, we cannot impose anything on our members on editorial part. They have full independence from the government, imagine from us. So, no, yes, of course, we try to stress this point to them, and each one will answer according to his internal policy. But in terms of commitment for the future, first, we are strongly committed to make of this a living document, because if we have seen that we cannot sit on it and waiting for the next 5 years before to change again, because the situation is so fastly changing. And I think that first thing we have to do, all of us within the ITU and UNICEF, is to push on those members of the industry that didn't accept to sit with us in this phase, to reconsider the position and to come. I think that at one stage they will come, and it's inevitable that they will come, because there is a need for global policies, or at least global recommendation. What we shall do as broadcasters, first we will send the document. The document is already on our website since this morning, so this is already a first signal. But then we will send individually to each general director of our members, with a letter of our president explaining the importance of the document, and we also we will present it at the General Assembly that we have in December, where most of our members attend. Apart of that, the work that EBU does is usually a part of this ritual meetings in which we find and we meet and gathers. There are also the core business of EBU is transfer of competences. So when we have a best practice somewhere, we suggest to the members in needs, or members that are starting a new services, or members that are starting the online. For instance, the Jordanian television has launched the website. Sorry, but this is the reality according to the various situation of the country. They are launching a website. We have a mission going there, helping them to properly setting in October. And of course, one of the first things that they will do will be to take in account this, to have a specific child online protection section within their policy. This is what we do every day, and this is what we will do for the next years after this document. Thank you.
Thanks, Giacomo. I know we can always count on you. Yeah. Belinda?
I forgot to mention one other thing that the GSMA will be doing. We run a capacity building program for regulators and policymakers, which we target around 1,000 students each year to go through our courses. And within our program, we have a 2-day course on mobile and children, which talks about best practice and case studies and how policymakers should, approach the issue. So we will certainly be referring to the guidelines in that course content, and we hopefully will roll that out at least 25 times before the end of this year.
Thanks, Belinda. In fact, you mentioned something that I'd like to follow up on. In our the ITU's World Telecom Development Conference in Dubai in March and April, capacity building on child online protection at the regional level, our members placed particular emphasis on this. So we will be launching regional initiatives, and the guidelines will be an important part of that. So, anyone else have any questions on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. May I have further information about the program you are just mentioned about?
Yes, probably something we can pick up after the session, and I can take you through the course catalogue.
Oh, hello. I just want to say that we're sharing with our network the guidelines. It's just send it to the network and the members.
It's flying. Actually, in terms of the question about the baseline, I think Pritam was going to talk about some of the kind of metrics, or what does success look like. No? Well, Okay, but maybe just to mention that we are looking at the metrics, so how do we measure success in terms of this initiative and broader, and I think, this whole thing about the baseline is absolutely critical as a question there, where, how do we measure that in order to measure our success?
Any more comments, suggestions, ideas? Because it's very clear, we need help from the room to reach out to your constituents so that industry can be aware of what we are doing and be encouraged to adopt and implement these guidelines. So even if you cannot, if you can't think of anything right now, please reach out to us. We'll be very happy to take your suggestions. And I see Mohammed coming up with one.
Just to see, how are you going to evaluate the guidelines is actually implemented in the industries or that's actually meant to be? So do you have any mechanism for that, to evaluate or to really understand the impact of the guidelines in the market?
Again, so this is a good time for me to bring up what Aya just mentioned. So as part of the COP initiative, the broader COP initiative, we are moving towards more of a results-based management kind of approach, where we are setting targets, measurable targets to maximize the impact. Currently we are doing a lot of work, but the way it's structured is we are funding activities, collaborating on a project basis, reporting on individual activities. So what we want to do is kind of take a shift from this and look at more focusing on the results, focusing on funding for results, collaborating towards a common vision, aligning your existing and kind of new activities according to targets, objectives, goals. Then it's easier to measure the results. And also it's easier to bring reporting mechanisms in place, accountability in place. So we are working on that as part of the COP initiative. Once we kind of have something that we can agree on as COP partners, then we'll be presenting it for open consultation for better buy-in from all stakeholders. So it's work in progress at this point.
Maybe I could help you because I'm originally from a business intelligence background, and I used to create a balanced scorecard and the the KPIs for the business industries. So maybe we can come up with a framework where we can come up with a balanced scorecard approach on various nations and various industries, so that we can really see by in period wise if the guidelines is actually affecting in the industry or not. Maybe we can work together in that. Thank you very much.
In fact, we are having a small meeting after this session, not in this room, but in a room which is in the main building, first floor, called Fateh 6. And it's a small closed-door meeting, just informal brainstorming, but we'd be happy if you're around. Any further questions? I think we are perfectly on times. Exactly. So again, we thank you all for coming here, and we hope you do your bit to make sure that the guidelines are widely disseminated and adopted. Thank you very much.